I'm shaking right now. And I don't say that lightly. I don't say that for effect. I say it because what I am about to share with you has been sitting in my chest since the moment this came through, and I could not hold it back any longer because you need to hear this today. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, today. Because today is the day you finally find out the truth about what happened to you. The real truth. Not the version they told. Not the version you've been torturing yourself with at 3 a.m. when everything is quiet and your mind goes back to that moment. That moment when the people who were supposed to be your people went quiet, sat you down, or worse, never sat you down at all. Just slowly, deliberately, surgically removed your voice from the room. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You felt it before you could name it. You felt the temperature change. You felt the way people stopped asking for your opinion. The way conversations shifted when you walked in. The way laughter faded just slightly. The way you started to feel like a guest in rooms where you used to feel like you belonged. And you told yourself maybe you were imagining it. You weren't. And I need you to stay with me right now because what I am about to tell you, what the truth actually is about why they silenced you, is going to do 2 things. It is going to break your heart. And then it is going to set you completely, permanently, irreversibly free. Let me tell you what being silenced by your own people actually feels like. Because I don't think anyone has ever described it accurately to you. I don't think anyone has ever sat across from you, or in this case, right here in this moment, and actually named what you have been carrying. It doesn't feel like a fight. That would be easier. A fight has noise. A fight has words. A fight has the dignity of someone looking you in the eye and saying, "This is what I think about you." A fight means you existed enough for someone to be angry at you. Being silenced is different. Being silenced feels like invisibility with witnesses. You are there. They see you. But somehow your words land differently than everyone else's words. Somehow your ideas get ignored until someone else says the same thing, and suddenly it's brilliant. Somehow your presence in the room is tolerated but not celebrated. Somehow you start to feel like you are always performing, always trying, always earning a seat at a table that everyone else just walks up to and sits down at like it belongs to them. And the worst part, the part that I need you to hear because it is the part nobody talks about. The worst part is not the silence itself. It's what you did with it. Because you are someone who turns inward. You are someone who, when the world stops making sense, goes looking for the explanation inside yourself first. You are someone who asks, "What did I do? What did I say? What is wrong with me? What could I have been that would have made them choose me instead of choosing silence?" And that question lived in you for a long time. Maybe it still does. Maybe even right now as you are watching this, there is a part of you that still believes, still carries this quiet, devastating belief that if you had just been a little different, a little softer, a little less, a little more, somehow you could have made them want to hear you. I need you to stop. I need you to stop right there. Because that question, what is wrong with me, is the wrong question entirely. It is the question they needed you to keep asking. Because as long as you were asking that question, you were not asking the right one. And the right one is this: what is it about me that made them need me to be quiet? Sit with that. Yeah, sit with that. because those are two completely different questions that lead to two completely different answers. One question makes you smaller. One question makes you see. And today, right now, we are choosing to see. Let me take you back. Let me take you back to the beginning of this, not the moment you noticed it. Before that, because I want you to understand something important about how silencing works. It doesn't start with a conversation. It never does. It starts with a feeling, a very subtle, very quiet feeling that someone near you is becoming uncomfortable. Not with what you've done, not with something you've said, with what you are becoming. Think about when it started. Not the dramatic moment, not the fight, if there even was one. Think about the first time you felt it, that tiny shift, that microscopic change in how someone close to you responded to you. Maybe it was the first time you stood up for yourself, and there was this beat of silence before they responded that felt like it lasted 10 years. Maybe it was the first time you said something you actually believed instead of something you thought they wanted to hear, and the room got just a little bit colder. Maybe it was the first time you made a decision about your own life without asking for permission, and you noticed, just noticed, that something changed in how they looked at you after that. Yeah, that was the moment. That was the first brick. And from that moment, slowly, quietly, brick by brick, they built a wall between the version of you they could control and the version of you that was starting to emerge. And they built it so gradually that you barely noticed until one day you looked up and the wall was there and you were on one side and they were on the other and you had no idea how it happened. And they acted like you built it. That's the part that still takes my breath away. The absolute audacity of being the one who lays every single brick and then looking at the person on the other side of the wall and saying, "You did this. You pushed us away. You changed. You became someone we don't recognize." And the truth, the devastating, liberating truth, is that last part was real. You did become someone they didn't recognize, but not for the reason they made you believe. Here is what I need you to understand. And I need you to really let this in because your brain is going to want to resist it. Your conditioning is going to push back. The old story is going to try to reassert itself because old stories are comfortable even when they are destroying you. But here is the truth. You were not silenced because you were too little. You were silenced because you were too much. Not too much in the way they made it sound. Too dramatic, too sensitive, too loud, too needy, too difficult. That was their language for it. That was the translation they gave you so that you would accept the silencing and call it something reasonable. No. You were too much in the way that light is too much for someone who has lived in the dark for a very long time. Think about that. When you walk into a dark room and someone turns on the light, your first reaction is not gratitude. Your first reaction is to shield your eyes, to pull back, to feel, for just a moment, almost attacked by the brightness. That is what you did to the people around you. Not because you tried to. Not because you walked into their lives holding a torch and demanding they look at you. You just turned on. You started becoming yourself. You started operating at the frequency of who you actually are. And that frequency, that light, was so different from the dimness they had all agreed to live in that they felt it as a threat before they felt it as anything else. And when people feel threatened by a light, They do not examine why the light makes them uncomfortable. They reach for the switch. They reach for ways to dim you. Because here is the thing about people who have agreed to live small. And I say this without judgment. I say this because I understand how it happens. I understand the slow accumulation of disappointments and discouragements and all the small moments that teach a person to expect less. Here is the thing about people who have agreed to live small. Your refusal to do the same is a verdict on their choice, not in your words, not in your intentions, just in your existence. Every time you grew, you reminded them that growth was possible. Every time you spoke a truth they were afraid to speak, you revealed that truth-telling was survivable. Every time you set a boundary they had convinced themselves was impossible to set, you showed them they had been choosing not to set that boundary. And that was unbearable to them. Not because they hated you. Some of them, yeah, some of them did develop something that looked like hatred. But even that hostility was rooted in something much more fundamental than hate. It was rooted in shame. The shame of watching someone choose what they had told themselves was not available. The shame of realizing that their resignation was a choice and not a fact. The shame of seeing someone step into power and recognizing, even if just for 1 second, even if they never admitted it, that they could have done the same thing. That kind of shame needs somewhere to go, and it went to you. You became the container for everything they refused to feel about themselves. Their frustration, their fear, their sense of a wasted potential, their quiet grief about the version of their life they gave up on. They put all of that on you. They wrapped it up in language about you being too much, too different, too hard to be around. And they handed it back to you like it was yours. It was never yours. It was always theirs. I want to go deeper into this because I need you to understand the specific mechanism of what happened. Because it was not random. It was not just general discomfort with your growth. There were specific things, specific qualities in you that triggered the silencing. And I think you already know what they are. It was your perception. The way you see things that other people miss. The way you walk into a situation and within minutes you have understood something that takes other people years to figure out, if they ever figure it out at all. The way you read a room without trying, read a person without effort, read a dynamic between people with this quiet accuracy that is almost uncomfortable in its precision. Yeah, that scared them. Because people who are hiding things from others, from themselves, are terrified of someone who can see. And you can see. You always could. And your seeing meant they could not hide. Not completely. Not in the easy way they had learned to hide from everyone else. Around you, there was always this sense that the truth was close to the surface, that the real thing was right there, that if they stayed too long in your presence, something they had carefully contained would start to leak. And so they managed their proximity to you. They kept you at a distance that felt close enough to be called a relationship, but far enough that you could never quite get to the truth of them. And when that distance stopped being enough, when you started asking the questions they could not answer, naming the things they could not face, simply being the person that your growth required you to become, they made the distance permanent. They silenced you not to protect themselves from your words. They silenced you to protect themselves from your clarity. That is the truth. And I know that sitting with that truth is its own kind of grief, because it means the silencing was never fixable in the way you thought it was. There was no right thing to say. There was no softer version of yourself that would have been accepted. There was no apology, no compromise, no act of smallness that would have earned you a permanent place in that room. Because it was never about your behavior. It was about your being. And your being, who you are at the deepest level, is not something you can change. It is not something you should change. It is the thing that is most true about you. So here is what the silencing reveals about who you are. And this is the part I was shaking about. Because when I started to put this together, when I started to see the full picture of what happens to people like you, people with this specific quality, this specific kind of inner life, I had to stop. I had to take a breath. Because it is not what people expect to hear. You are not someone who was silenced because you failed. You are someone who was silenced because you passed. You passed a test that most people don't even know they are taking. The test of whether your sense of self is so rooted, so grounded, so fundamentally yours that even the people closest to you cannot shake it out of you. And you passed because you are still here. You are still asking questions. You are still looking for the truth. You are still refusing, even now, even after everything, to accept a version of reality that doesn't feel right to you, even when that version was handed to you by people you trusted, even when accepting it would have been so much easier. You could not do it. You tried, maybe. But something in you kept saying no, kept saying this is not the whole story, kept saying there is something else here that I cannot see yet, but I know it is there. That refusal, that persistent, stubborn, quiet, unbreakable refusal to accept someone else's story as your final truth, that is the thing they could not silence. And that right there is everything. Here is what you carry, what you have always carried, what they could feel in your presence even before you could articulate it yourself. You carry the kind of truth that is contagious. When you believe something, really, deeply, genuinely believe it, people around you feel it, not just hear it, feel it, like a frequency that resonates in their chest before their mind has had time to process it. You have this quality of conviction that doesn't need to be loud to be felt. You can say something quietly, calmly, without drama, without performance, and the room changes. The room changes. That is not a small thing. That is a rare thing. That is the kind of thing that builds movements and changes minds and shifts the direction of other people's lives. And the people around you felt it. They didn't have the vocabulary for it. They couldn't say, oh, this person carries truth in a way that reorganizes reality. But they felt the effect of it. They felt how their own comfortable certainties became less certain in your presence. They felt how the stories they had told themselves about who they were, about what was possible, about what they deserved, started to loosen, started to question themselves, started to need defending in a way they never had to be defended before you came along. And instead of following that feeling into growth, they chose to remove the source of it. They chose to remove you. But here is what they didn't understand. You cannot remove a frequency. You can remove the person. You can silence the voice. You can close the door and pretend the light was never there. But the frequency? The truth? The quality of presence that made their certainties wobble? That doesn't leave when you leave. It stays. It works on them in the quiet moments. In the middle of the night when everything is still. In the moments when something happens in their life and their first instinct, before they can stop it, is to think about you, to wonder what you would say, to feel the absence of your clarity like a specific kind of cold. They silenced your voice. They could not silence what you represent. And what you represent is this: the possibility of being completely, uncomplicatedly, unapologetically yourself and surviving it. That is the threat you posed. And that is the gift you carry. The very thing they tried to suppress. Your willingness to see clearly, to speak truthfully, to grow without apologizing for the growing. That is the thing that was always going to set you apart. That was always going to move you into a different chapter than the one they wrote for you. That was always the thing that was going to carry you somewhere they could not follow. Not because you are better than them, because you are different from what they needed you to be, and different here, in this specific context, in this specific story. Different is everything. So what do you do with all of this? What do you do now that you know the truth? Now that you understand that the silencing was not a verdict on your worth, but a reaction to your power. Now that you can see, maybe for the first time clearly, that what they tried to take from you was never actually theirs to take, here is what you do. You stop waiting for them to give you back the voice they tried to take. Because your voice was never in their possession. It was always yours. And here is the proof. You are still speaking. Maybe not to them. Maybe not in that room. Maybe not in the language they understand or the form they recognize. But you are still here. Still forming thoughts. Still asking questions. Still refusing to accept a story that doesn't ring true. That is your voice. That is your clarity. That is the exact quality they tried to silence and failed. They failed. I need you to hear that. They failed because you are still you. After everything, after all the quiet exclusions, all the subtle dismissals, all the moments where your presence was tolerated but not welcomed, all the ways they tried to convince you that the smallest version of yourself was the correct version, you are still you. Shaken, maybe. Yeah, definitely shaken. Grieving, probably. Tired in a way that sleep doesn't entirely fix. But still you. Still the person with the perception that made them uncomfortable. Still the person whose truth is contagious. Still the person who can walk into a room and change the temperature just by being fully, quietly, completely present. That did not go anywhere. It was waiting. It was waiting for this moment, this exact moment, where you finally understand what it is and stop treating it like a defect. Because here is the thing about gifts that are powerful enough to make other people uncomfortable. They often don't look like gifts at first. They look like problems. They look like the reason you can't quite fit in, can't quite make it easy, can't quite be the person that the room around you seems to need you to be. They look like the thing that keeps getting you in trouble, the thing that makes relationships complicated, the thing that you have maybe in your quietest moments wished you could turn off. But you cannot turn off who you are. And the people who try to silence you, even they, even with everything they threw at it, could not turn off who you are. So stop trying to be less of it. Stop managing your perceptions so other people feel comfortable. Stop softening your truth so the room stays warm. Stop making yourself smaller so that people who chose to live small don't have to confront that choice in your presence. That's not generosity. I know it feels like generosity. I know it feels like kindness, like consideration, like the mature thing to do. But it is not. It is a betrayal. A betrayal of the thing that is most true about you. A betrayal of every version of yourself that endured the silencing and survived it. A betrayal of the future that is waiting on the other side of you, stepping fully into who you actually are. And that future is real. I need you to know that. The future where you speak and people stop and listen. The future where you take up the space that was always yours. The future where the right people, the ones who are not threatened by your clarity but nourished by it, find their way into your life and stay. The future where the silencing becomes the origin story of the loudest, most powerful chapter you have ever lived. That future is not a fantasy. It is the natural consequence of what you have been through. Because here is the thing about surviving the kind of silencing you survived. It either breaks you or it builds something in you that cannot be broken. And you are still here. So it built something. It built in you a relationship with your own truth that is now so deep, so tested, so forged in fire real that no one, no room, no group, no family system, no social circle, no version of collective silence can shake it anymore. You know who you are now in a way you could not have known before the silencing, because you were tested and you didn't fail. You didn't walk away from yourself, even when every voice around you was telling you to. You didn't abandon your perception, even when the people you loved most were insisting it was wrong. You didn't become the person they needed you to be, even when becoming that person would have been so much easier and so much quieter and so much less painful. You stayed. You stayed with yourself. And now, right now, after all of it, you are the most you that you have ever been. More honest, more clear, more specifically, precisely, unapologetically yourself than you were before any of this started. And that is not a coincidence. That is the result of going through the exact thing that you went through. They thought they were punishing you. God was preparing you. Yeah, sit with that. They thought the silence was a sentence. It was a chrysalis. Everything they tried to use to diminish you, the exclusion, the dismissal, the slow removal of your voice from their spaces, all of it was just the pressure that makes diamonds. And you know what diamonds do? Yeah, you know. They survive everything thrown at them and they come out the other side clearer, brighter, worth more than everything that tried to crush them. That is you. That is what the silencing reveals about who you are. Not that you were weak enough to be broken, that you were strong enough to survive the attempt. And that right there, that specific quality, that unbreakable thread of self that ran through every quiet, painful, grinding moment of being unseen and unheard by the people who should have chosen you. That is not something that can be taken. It was never something they could give you in the first place. It came from somewhere much deeper than them. It came from you. It has always been you. And now that you know, now that you understand what happened and why and what it means about who you carry inside of you, I have one thing left to say. Stop being quiet about it. Not to them. You don't owe them your voice, but to the world that is waiting for exactly what you carry. Because somewhere right now, and I mean this completely, somewhere right now there is someone sitting in the same silence you survived. Someone who has been told in 1,000 quiet ways that their perception is wrong, their truth is too much, their presence is a problem. Someone who is one conversation, one message, one moment of feeling genuinely seen away from choosing themselves instead of choosing the smallness that everyone around them is comfortable with. And your voice, the voice they tried to take, is the thing that reaches that person, not in spite of everything you went through, because of it. So speak. Take up your space. Trust the perception that made them uncomfortable. Use the clarity that terrified them. Step fully into the version of yourself that the silencing was trying to prevent you from becoming. Because you didn't survive all of that to stay quiet. You survived it to finally, permanently, completely be heard. That is who you are. That is what this was always about. I love you. Stay with yourself. You are exactly where you are supposed to be.